I want to welcome Agile XRM to the podcast. I've known the people at Agile XRM for the past 12 years. I've seen how their business process management tool can add massive value to complex organizational processes in sectors such as finance and government. If you have complex processes or a need for dialogues on the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, take a look at how this BPM tool can add value. You can find them at agilexrm.com or check out the show notes for more details. Welcome to the Power Platform Show. If you want to be a supporter of the show, if you've enjoyed it, if you've watched lots of episodes, listened to lots of episodes, probably more to the point, feel free to be a supporter. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 guy. Now, this is a great conversation that I had with Joel Lindstrom. I hope you enjoy it. Today's guest is from South Carolina in the United States. He works at Hitachi Solutions America as a senior director for low code. He's passionate about helping others through the Power Platform community via podcast, blogs, public speaking about business applications. You can visit his website at crm.audio to learn more about him. And he's the inspiration for this podcast. I've been podcasting for 4 years, and it's because of this guy right here. Welcome to the show, Joel Lindstrom.
Mark Smith, my old friend. Good to talk to you. It's been too long.
It has. And it's great that we're having this little episode here to explore some of the things that we've seen change in recent times in our industry and, where that'll take us.
Yeah, I think both of us have had career changes due to, or in some ways, the pandemic was partly responsible for them.
Yeah. So tell us, I always like to find out food, family, and fun, and I know we've done this before, but it's been years since we have. So just let's update everybody. Where are things at with you when it comes to those three things, food, family, and fun?
So start with food. In the last week, I've learned several new techniques for making food. I have been sous videing. And for those of you who don't know what sous videing means, it means cooking in a warm bath with vacuum. And it is literally almost impossible to mess up. I mean, you can leave stuff in the warm bath. So is this where you
have a bag in submerged water?
Yeah. So I picked up a vacuum sealer on Amazon for $40. And I got, it's a Ninja Foodie, but it's kind of like an Instapot, but it has a sous vide feature. And I said, what's that sous vide thing? So I tried out with some steak. It's awesome. And what I do is I sous vide it and then put it on the grill or the stove to sear it so it has that nice texture. But as far as moist in a good way, I've been doing everything. I also explored how to cold brew coffee. I would make coffee and put ice cubes in it, but no, I've been actually cold brewing. So I'm branching out.
I love it. Tell me what you've removed from your life lately.
What have I removed? Twitter. I removed Twitter from my life, and it was great because I looked around, and I think I talked about this in several places. I'm not the guy who wants to get up on the soapbox and say everybody should leave Twitter, but for me, it was just it was just a negative force in my life because every time I'd go there, something would make me upset, and it was just the. I really feel that if you're on Twitter for very long, the mob is going to come after you for something. And I don't want to give that to them. So, whatever your political persuasion is, somebody's going to go. And I'm okay with people getting mad at me, but just seeing the way that the mob can get stirred up and go after someone for something they said 10 years ago. And so it's been a positive thing for me. It's one of those things that I asked myself, if I didn't have a Twitter account now, would I start one? No, I don't see any value in it. And I can still learn what's going on in my communities without it. So
I wonder how much on, because I see parallels in my life. Like early in your career, you're wanting to get your reputation out there, you're wanting to get a name out there and engage in the community. And then, I just got an email notification today of my 10-year ring, for the MVP program. And
congratulations, by the way.
thank you. But like, the point was like early in your career, you do all these things and you're not sure what works, and and then you find that you need to declutter at some point. You need to almost do less, so the things that you do really well become the thing that you do really well.
Absolutely. I think you have to say yes to a lot of things early in your career to find out what you're good at and to make connections and to move forward in your career. But when you reach the point where you are happy doing what you're doing, you're not really trying to become the king of the world. And you know, it's okay to start saying no to stuff. You have to, otherwise you will say yes to burnout. And that's kind of where I was going. So I've had to take a step back and look at, you know, even podcasting. I haven't done much podcasting lately. It's not that I don't like podcasting. It's just, I have to ask myself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to get one more follower? And what am I going to do with that follower when I got it? If I had I had some episodes that had tens of thousands of downloads, and that kind of goes to your head. But I mean, you can't take those 20,000 downloads to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee with them. So what's the point?
Correct. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I've been a prolific blogger. I've used social media platforms. I've done YouTube. And the thing now, I just looked up. It's been 4 years that I've been podcasting pretty consistently, and I think that I have dyslexia, so therefore writing was always a hard thing for me. I mean, anyone that's followed any of my social media for some time will see the spelling errors and things like that. That's who I am, right? It doesn't come naturally to me. It's always hard, very hard work for me to communicate that way. But I find with podcasting, it is really, it suits, I'd say, I use this term, it suits my neurodiversity. It's aligned for who I am. And what I've found is that I've gone through phases, right, of doing it through drudgery. I didn't want to do it when, you don't want to keep scheduling yet another one, or you keep getting pushback from people that you're trying to get on the show. But I've now got to this place where it's just pure enjoyment for me. Like, I do it because I enjoy getting someone like yourself on that you can just have a conversation, which always surprises me when I get feedback and people go, wow, you wouldn't believe how what you said there, the impact it had. In fact, I'll give you an example that's happened in the last 30 minutes. I was I was doing a coaching call with somebody in America, and they said to me, you did a podcast with Sarah Lagerquist about, the journey that she's gone on with breast cancer. And I'm listening to this on a business podcast. And he said, I listened it through because I listened to every episode. And he said, then the next day, my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Wow.
And I'm like, and he goes, I had so much context in that point because of the podcast I'd seen the next day. And you're just like, wow, yes, the impact, that you can have, it blows me away.
Yeah. And that's great because you're being kind of a vessel for other people to share their stories. Yeah. And that was not something you planned, but it's just something that comes, I think, from the authenticity with it. And the other advice and I've given this advice, I think it's good advice to people new in their career, find your niche. Don't be broad, be narrow, go deep. I still think that's a good thing. Like, if you look at the people on YouTube or TikTok or whatever that have millions of followers, they're very narrow niches a lot of time, and they're doing that one thing. But you reach a point where, what if you feel stifled in that niche and you want to broaden out, you want to do other technologies, or you want to do other stuff? That's okay. Just ask yourself why you do that. And that's the same thing with when I was more on the dynamic side of the world. The advice was always specialize, find something to specialize, but I never had a specialty. I was always the person leading the weird projects and the XRM projects. And that's really why I took to Power Platform. It's to me, XRM 2.0, 3.0, whatever the .0 is now. But basically it's the everything else, everything that's not sales, customer service, et cetera. Nothing wrong with sales and customer service, but it gives you the flexibility to branch out into a lot of really interesting places.
So tell us about the last 3 years for you and your journey from somebody, a leader, thought leader in the Dynamics 365 space, into the Power Platform space. And of course, there'll be some people that go, isn't it the same thing? Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it starts back, I think it was MVP Summit 2016. I think it was 2016 when they showed us, I think you were there too. They showed us the preview of what would become Power Apps and Power Automate or Flow at that time. I signed up for for the preview right then. I built my first Flow, I think later that week, or maybe even on the plane coming back from MVP Summit. And I went back and I talked to our company leadership, or at least our practice leadership, and said, "Hey, the world's changing. We need to adapt." And then I spent the next 2 to 3 years just banging the drum, being that guy saying, "Hey, we need to learn this. We need to get ready for it." And then we started delivering some projects and had some success, and it just snowballed to the point where we couldn't organically staff the demand of the Power Platform that was coming in. We had people who got really good at it. You've interviewed Harded a couple times. He's amazing. He's the walking encyclopedia of Power Apps formulas. You cannot stump the guy. I've tried multiple times.
Do you want to send him to Australia? That'd be awesome. I guarantee I can give him a job.
Anyway, no, we're not going to do that. So with that, it became obvious we needed to have people who were specialists that were next level good with this. Not that your average Dynamics consultant can't do Canvas apps and can't do advanced flows and RPA and AI Builder and all that. Many of them can. But the difference that I realized after we had some of our early projects were kind of awkward, because customers were starting to believe Microsoft when they said this is a citizen developer platform. And you could easily find yourself in the place where the person who is the consultant on the project doesn't know as much about formulas or how to write a good Canvas app as the customer does. If the customer's been playing for it and focused on it for 3, 4, 6 months and built some apps, you need to be better than them to justify charging for consulting with them. And so that's where my mission became, hey, let's upscale. And so we had several people that we hired, some who were MVPs already, but several who were people that you have probably never heard of, people who were admins or makers for companies, people who were private consultants working on their own. And it's like the switch was flipped, and now they can do what they love to do, but do it as part of their day job. And it's been amazing. We had several people from the community who were in the power users group and things like that, who again were just answering a bunch of questions and doing it. And now they're doing it in their real life. And the interesting I found is the people who have grown up on Power Platform using SharePoint and the standard connectors and all the limitations in them are extremely creative and scrappy. They've figured out how to make do with limitations. And once they get the good stuff in Dataverse, they take to it very quickly and can very quickly learn, more advanced stuff like how to do ALM and build tools and all that good stuff.
So I want to unpack a few things that you said there. One, as a consultant, as a consulting company practice, that's concerning when the customer is often further ahead of the curve than the potential consultants going in. Right?
It's scary. It's like, as a lot of times in the dynamic world, it's this mystique, deserved or not, about you need the specialist to do this. You don't want to do this yourself. You need us to come in with our team, and you need us to do all the work, and we'll train you a little bit at the end and transfer some knowledge. But no, you need us to do it. Where chances are your customers are already started with something with Power Apps or Power Automate. And so it's like getting on the bus while it's driving down the road. And sometimes.
So how have you found, coming from a model-driven mindset, shall we say, with that we came, with our Dynamics backgrounds, to the canvas with connectors, with a user interface where, if you like, the app wasn't designed from a data up perspective in a lot of cases. And, we would say, the data is the most important thing, and it is important. But we're seeing now experiences, as in how somebody does what they do, the execution, the user experience is now. I'm not trying to say it's as important as data, but there's an even footing, if you like, and you're seeing a lot of people in the in the Power App maker space, the Canvas space, that are really more focused on that than necessary data models. And with data models, we come with baggage that it's easy to what we would have said, create an entity or create a table and fields and columns, rows, all those type of things. How is there a risk that those that come from a dynamics background have an arrogance about how simple it is to pick up and create Canvas?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had this happen in, I think, 6 interviews so far, where you advertise for a Power Platform developer, consultant, architect, whatever title you want to go with. And you get someone who's an old-time Dynamics person. And talking to them, you're asking them, their resume says Power Apps all over it. And so you dig into that. Tell me about some things you built. And they will tell you what they built sometimes. And then you get to, hell, have you ever built a Canvas app? And almost verbatim what they say is, well, I haven't built a Canvas app, but if I needed to, I could. It's this kind of arrogance that comes from, in some ways, the way model-driven apps work. And you can walk into any Dynamics CE module, except probably field service, and figure it out. Or some new feature comes out. You can maybe stay up a little bit late the night before, play with it and figure it out. I mean, I did that with sales forecasting and goals and all that stuff. But what you don't realize is just how different it is, and how, even though it's low code, some of those formulas get very complex. I encourage anyone to download one of the team template apps. And again, Hardeep Bhatia has been a driving force behind that. And then look at like the on-load or on-visible formulas for that. And then tell me you could learn to do that on the job.
Yeah.
You can't. You need to practice. And that's the other thing of it is it's kind of a drive. It's kind of a hunger, because the people that, as a general rule, the people that I have hired that have been really successful with specifically Canvas apps are people who are hungry and are building things on their own. And that's kind of foreign to us as Dynamics people. We generally would not play with, maybe when you were first starting out, but generally people aren't going to be building model-driven apps on the weekend or on nights. But again, the people that are, they get really good at it, and they find a challenge and then they solve it. And that's the kind of thing that if you're looking for specifically to broaden and get into a Power Apps developer role, that's what you need to do to learn it and be comfortable with it, and not be fazed when the customer asks you how to do advanced collection or load save data or responsive layouts or all the stuff that isn't obvious from just going to an app in a day.
How are things changing in your observation in the consulting landscape, particularly in the area of business applications that we work in? How are things changing from, I would typically structure my team around 3 core roles. And I'm not talking about the supporting roles like project delivery, like change management, like user like testing, that type of thing. I'm talking about a functional, which was somewhat in my mind, if I simplified it, was they had BA skills in the context of the application, right? So they could take a business requirement, translate it. Didn't have to be a developer. Then I had my devs, which were, .NET developers that knew how to extend what you could do on the platform. Integration, data migration often fitted in their portfolio. Third, we'd have architects, right, that took the big picture, looked at the moving parts, and could oversee complexity and bring it together. And of course, there's fluidity along those. If you looked at a modern, and I'm not talking about Dynamics business anymore, I'm talking about a Power Platform practice. What are you seeing the consultants now within that practice? What do they look like? What type of roles are they? What type of things are they doing? And how is it different from the former world of Dynamics?
So I would say that one of the characteristics of a Power Platform versus Dynamics project is the Power Platform projects are generally shorter. There's, our projects are not like 1 week projects. They're typically maybe a couple months, but they're half to 60% of the duration of because you're usually doing more focused applications. You're not doing an entire sales process, entire customer service process. You're doing something like we do a lot of inspection apps, which is replacing paper forms or manual forms with electronic versions and other things like that. So they're generally shorter. So as a result, I find the people that are most successful and what I kind of look for, I call them techno-functional, kind of a mix of the both, because some of the technical stuff has become easier. You don't generally need somebody who is as technical as you need to write plugins in JavaScript. And there still is a place for plugins and all that. So we do have people when needed can do that. But formulas and custom connectors are being written by people who are not your traditional technical developers. And because the projects are generally shorter, they generally don't have the budget for as big of a team, nor do you need as big of a team. And a lot of times the customer is playing part of that role too. So if I am Acme Corporation, I've hired 3 people that I want to be my makers. They just don't know the platform yet. When we come in and do the project, they're going to want to be active participants. They might be wanting to make some flows. Somebody might want to make a custom connector to their ERP system, something like that. And so that's where the people that are most successful are the ones that can kind of do both, meaning they can do discovery and design out a business process and a data model, and then actually do some of the development. Now, there still is the need for the architect and for overall, because again, we don't go in saying this is a Canvas app, this is a model-driven app, this is whatever. We want to first understand the business process, put the right pieces in place. And so generally you still want to have somebody in that architect role, and you still need to do testing. And that's where, I call my group the Rapid Solution Development Practice, because we're using low code to rapidly develop solutions, but we're still doing it development best practices. So we still have testing. We still have, still set up a backlog. Sometimes that backlog is like 12 stories. It's not the 300 you have with the Dynamics project. I'm still trying to institute best practices. I try and do it unless it's like a POC something, we try to do ALM and source code with every project as well, just because that's the kind of thing that people that get started without any kind of training or help and just go off on their own, they may get very good and advanced with formulas, but they will not necessarily know how to build a solution well or how to design a good data model. And so by doing that and incorporating those best practices, but doing it in a lighter, shorter form, it's very successful. And so by doing that, some projects will look like more like the traditional Dynamics projects. Some will be more of a mix or hybrid of your resources plus the customer resources.
Yeah. One thing you didn't touch on there, and just because I know this is something that you guys are definitely in scope, is what about the user interface and that user experience component? And why I highlight that is that, I've been on a bit of a passion trip for a while around why does a Power App have to look like a Power App? In other words, why does it look like so out of the boxish in nature? It doesn't, perhaps is not as, I use the term sexy, or not as, it's more than just theming, something which, you could do back in the model-driven world as well. What's your thoughts around the importance of these individuals, these contributors, the designer, the somebody that looks at it from, and I'm talking about people that have come from more a traditional design background rather than a software background, but in context of software constraints, etc., understand that and still create like the guy, the team template apps that you talk about, they look awesome.
Right. Right. And that's the thing as well. People go to an app in a day, learn how to build an app from data. It looks like your traditional Power App. It has, all the the three screens. It has the normal back arrows. And that's okay. I mean, you can quickly build an app and you can get a functional app, but it's not pretty and it's not one that people like to use. So yes, user experience is very important, but I would maintain it's been important for a long time, even with model-driven apps. And there's been some really, really badly designed, thought out model-driven apps that are 10 clicks to get someplace. So even if you are not going to Canvas apps, UX is important, especially the things that are going to rock everybody's world are PowerFX, Canvas app formulas coming everywhere, and the custom pages, which if you haven't seen them, they're in preview now. It's essentially your sitemap link can be now your normal view form, or it can be a Canvas app inside your model-driven app. And that is going to lead to, I predict, some really awesome looking apps and some really, really ugly looking apps. Because you got to think, model-driven apps are responsive by design. You put in a Canvas app, but don't design it to be responsive, that's going to be a really bad experience.
Yeah.
And so
totally,
UX is extremely important. Now, we're fortunate because we've got a great UX team of designers. They're the same people who design custom applications and Azure portals. And we worked with them to kind of adapt that to Power Apps. And that's the thing that's kind of eye-opening to see a designer who's not a Power Apps person, the way that they think, and then seeing, oh, yes, we can adapt the controls in Power Apps to UX principles. Every platform, low code, pro code, et cetera, has limitations. It's just knowing how to work within those limitations to get a good looking experience. So I would encourage everybody to do two things. One is there's a good book that's kind of one of the standard UX books called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And it's been in existence for a long time. And the revised version is kind of outdated. It talks about some websites that don't exist anymore. But it's a really eye-opening thing. But the best advice I got was look at the apps that you like to use on your phone. Maybe you still use Twitter. Maybe you use the Outlook app. Maybe you use TikTok, whatever that app that's sticky that you love to use is. Look at how it's laid out. It usually has, you're not going through a million screens. You usually have either icons on the side or the bottom, a common top menu. And by doing that, just observing, hey, what do I like? What I like to use? You can borrow a lot of that and bring that into your apps to get a much, much better user experience.
Such a good way of looking at it, 'cause one of the questions I've had is how can we make business applications addictive, and it is looking at the apps like a TikTok, like a Netflix interface, right? You don't need a manual to it's logical in how it comes together. So, yeah, I think you guys are leading the way there in how you're bringing designers in. It's interesting. I had a conversation earlier the week with somebody at Microsoft, and they're reflecting on themselves, and they said, we have technical leads, we have business leads, but we have no design leads fundamentally built into Microsoft business applications.
Right.
And I think there might be a future for that, to really go index heavily on creating on the user interface. And I'll just leave it at user interface. I won't say user experience because I think the experiences are getting great, but the user interface particularly, there's plenty of room to grow, to use, some of the user interface tools like that Adobe have, things like that how if someone's building a app for mobile these days would use if they're coming from a design perspective.
Right. And that's one of the things when I do a workshop or we plan it out. Equally important in my mind to the backlog is some kind of wireframe. Now you can go all out and do Figma and photorealistic stuff, but even if it's in PowerPoint, or even what we'll do sometimes is, use Power Apps to create a wireframe, just not connected to any data, whatever. But that's a good way as well to start thinking of the user experience first and making sure that the direction you're going is going to be a usable experience. The other advice, if you are a Canvas app maker and you don't have any Canvas apps or flows that you use every day or every week in your personal life, you're not going to be very effective. You need to be a user of Power Apps, and that will then show you all those rough edges and cliffs that people run into. And, we've all seen when somebody, even in Dynamics, develops something, but they don't actually use it. You can tell because on paper, this looks good going through 10 screens to get here. It works, but it's not anything anybody's going to want to use. So by building an app, the next time you have an itch to go to the App Store and download a task manager or a food tracker or whatever, build that app yourself, start using it, see where some of the UX issues or challenges are, and figure out ways to make it better. And by doing that, you will become a better maker of apps.
Last question before we get on to quickfire is what are the patterns you're seeing of the new talent that's coming into the business around the Power Platform?
Just some really, really amazingly creative and smart people doing things that I never would have figured out how to do, especially when there's a challenge and they figure out how to work around it. I mentioned Hardit. He's found ways to do things that, myself and people at Microsoft didn't even think were possible. Matthew Devaney, Vivek Bavishi, other people that are on our various teams at Hitachi have just amazed me with the things that they've been able to do with the platform. Dedication as well, just kind of a sticking with it, seeing it through because they love the technology. And that's where I'm seeing the career paths kind of change. The traditional career path, and I've observed this in multiple partners, was you start out as maybe a consultant, then you move to either a project manager or an architect, then you get to management and you stop using the technology. The people that I'm seeing, I don't think they're going to want to follow that same path. Now, some will, I'm sure, but they really, really love the technology. They're doing it mainly. The driving thing is they love the technology. I think that's going to lead to some different career paths. So, for example, while I lead my own practice, I still regularly will give myself tasks in projects, not the main one because I can't dedicate that much time, but I'm not going to stop learning and growing because I just love the technology. And I think that's one thing that is going to, lead to some different roles, different types of careers than what we've been used to in the Dynamics world.
I like it. Okay. I'd like to wrap up with some quick fire questions.
Okay.
As always.
I'm ready.
Here we go. Would you rather save money or time, and why?
If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said money, but I've realized how valuable time is. And maybe I'm feeling like I'm getting old or something, but you just realize that, time goes so fast and you can make more money. You can't make more time. So I would say save time.
Agreed. What's the most surprising self-realization you've had?
That in the last, say, 4 months, that I need sleep. In the last 15 years, way undervalued sleep, and tie it to the previous question, feel like, if I stay up for 3 more hours, 4 more hours, 5 more hours and grind it through, there's short-term benefits to that and you can get a lot of kudos. But it's the productivity trap I see is I used to do a productivity podcast, and what I realized was productivity is kind of like reorganizing your desk, a million times instead of actually getting things done, or kind of turns into that. And feeling like you get a rush from getting a lot done, being the top contributor, being the person who writes 40 blog posts a month or whatever. But then, it catches up with you. And what I realize is there's two Joels, the Joel at 11 o'clock at night, where I'm right now, and the Joel at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I can't think of how many times where I've had this thing that I can't get off my mind, some work problem, some project problem. And it seems like such a big deal at 11 o'clock at night, but at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning after getting a good night of sleep, it's not a big deal.
So good. So good. Last question. What's a skill you learned when you were young that you still use today?
No, I have to think about that. Skill that I learned. You kind of stumped me on this one, Mark.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. That's awesome.
And there's a number of things. There's a number of things that I learned from my father.
Yeah.
I would say that a skill that I learned when I was younger, maybe not when I was a kid, but one of the things I did early in my career that was very helpful for me was Toastmasters. And
Brilliant.
I don't go to Toastmasters anymore. My totally honest answer on Toastmasters was I love the program, but I got irritated by the people because you have everything you do. I don't care if it's fishing. I don't care if it's golf, cooking food. There's the snobs. There's the people that are way 100%. Too much into it. And in my opinion, in my opinion, that spoils the positive things. But the positive thing I learned from that when I was in my 20s was the ability to think on my feet, to give feedback, and the skills that you learn in evaluating speeches and giving feedback, I found extremely valuable when I'm having hard conversations with both customers and employees.
Joel, it's been amazing to talk to you. I would recommend, if you want to follow Joel, jump on TikTok. You can find him at Joel Lindstrom 0.
So I got a golden retriever, and most of my TikTok is me seeing what he will eat, because this dog will literally eat anything. I have not found anything I give him. And then I've got the other dog that's 7, and she is very picky. So I feed him. The general script is I give him a carrot or an apple or something. He eats it. Then I give it to my other dog. She spits it out. He comes along and eats it. So that's pretty much every video I have.
I love it. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP, Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 guy. If there's a guest you'd like to see on the show, please let me know. LinkedIn's the best way to get hold of me. If you want to be a supporter of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 guy, and I'll have a brew on you. Thanks again. See you next time.